On the 22nd of January 1944, before dawn broke over the Tyrrhenian Sea, Allied landing craft moved silently toward the Italian coast near a quiet resort town called Anzio. The water was calm, the sky strangely clear, and for a brief moment it seemed as if war itself had paused. Soldiers expected chaos, gunfire, and death. Instead, they found silence. No machine guns screamed from the cliffs. No German soldiers rushed the beaches. Men stepped onto the sand almost unbelieving, thinking the enemy had fled or been caught asleep. Some even joked that Rome might fall within days. That calm would soon become one of the most dangerous illusions of the war. Operation Shingle was meant to be bold and decisive. By landing behind German lines, the Allies hoped to break the brutal stalemate at Monte Cassino and open the road to Rome. The plan depended on speed, aggression, and relentless pressure. Yet as thousands of troops secured the beaches, their commanding general, John P. Lucas, hesitated, haunted by memories of Gallipoli and fearing a devastating counterattack. He chose caution over momentum. Tanks were unloaded slowly. Defensive positions were dug instead of roads being seized. Every hour lost allowed the Germans to recover. What looked like wisdom soon became paralysis, and that pause changed everything. German commanders, shocked at first by the unopposed landing, reacted with ruthless efficiency. Hitler himself demanded that Anzio become a killing ground. Within days, German divisions raced toward the beachhead from every direction. Artillery was dragged into the surrounding hills, carefully positioned, perfectly concealed. The Allies, trapped between the sea and rising ground, suddenly understood the truth. They had walked into a natural bowl of death. Shells began falling without warning, tearing through tents, supply dumps, and boaties alike. Soldiers called it the Anzio Express because death arrived as regularly as a train schedule, unstoppable and precise. What followed was not a breakthrough, but a siege. 4 months, Allied troops were pinned down in a strip of land barely wide enough to breathe. German guns dominated every movement, advancing men exposure. Staying still meant being shelled. Rain turned foxholes into graves filled with mud and water. The wounded screamed for medics who could not reach them. Air superiority offered little comfort, as bombs could not silence every hidden gun. Tanks burned on the beaches, twisted metal monuments to lost chances. The sea that once promised escape now only delivered more men into the grinder. The psychological toll was as brutal as the physical one. Soldiers lived with constant pressure, unable to escape the whistling of incoming shells. Men stopped reacting to explosions because reacting wasted energy. Survival became mechanical. Eat when possible, sleep when allowed, dig deeper every night. Letters from home spoke of hope, while the front offered only waiting. Waiting to attack. Waiting to be hit. Waiting to die. The beaches that had been taken without a fight now demanded blood daily, slowly, methodically, without glory or movement. By February, German counterattacks surged forward with terrifying force. Infantry advanced through smoke and rain, supported by armor and relentless artillery. Some Allied positions collapsed under sheer pressure. Hand-to-hand fighting erupted in flooded trenches. Lines bent, but did not fully break. Courage existed everywhere, but courage alone could not undo lost time. The opportunity to strike inland early had vanished. Now every yard gained cost lives measured not in dozens, but in thousands. The beachhead held, but at a horrifying price. When the breakout finally came months later, it was no longer a daring maneuver but a necessity born of exhaustion. Fresh troops, massive firepower, and overwhelming numbers pushed the Germans back. Rome would eventually fall, but not because of brilliance at Anzio. It fell despite Anzio. By then, over 40,000 Allied soldiers were dead, wounded, or missing. German losses were equally severe. The town itself lay in ruins, shattered by a battle it never asked to host. Victory tasted hollow, heavy with names that would never return home. Historians still debate the moment when everything changed. Some point to Lucas's hesitation. Others argue the plan itself was flawed, underestimating German response. What remains undeniable is that Anzio became a symbol of how hesitation in war can be as deadly as recklessness. A landing that began in silence ended in screams. A mission designed to shorten the war instead prolonged suffering. The beach did not remember who was right or wrong. It only remembered blood. Anzio teaches a harsh lesson written into the sand with artillery fire and human cost. War does not forgive pauses when momentum is required. It punishes uncertainty without mercy. On that quiet January morning, history stood open for a brief moment. Tenit close. Slowly, violently, and permanently. The soldiers who landed believing Rome was within reach instead found themselves trapped in one of World War II's most unforgiving battles, where survival itself became the only objective left. By the time February tightened its grip on Anzio, the battlefield no longer felt like a beachhead but a prison carved into mud and steel. The Germans had completed their encirclement, and the Allies could sense it in every shell that landed with cruel accuracy. The hills surrounding the plain had become eyes and fists at the same time, watching, measuring, and striking. Nothing moved without being seen. Nothing gathered without being punished. Even the sea, once a symbol of arrival, now felt distant, cold, and uncaring. German artillery dominated the fight. Batteries hidden in vineyards, villages, and rocky slopes fired day and night, tearing the ground apart layer by layer. Supply dumps exploded in towers of flame. Field hospitals were hit so often that red crosses seemed to invite shells rather than protect against them. Wounded men learned to stay silent, knowing screams could draw fire. Medics crawled instead of walked. Command posts moved constantly, yet never fast enough. Anzio had become a killing bowl, and everyone inside it knew they were living on borrowed time. The Germans launched a massive counteroffensive, determined to push the Allies back into the sea. Infantry surged forward through rain and smoke, screaming orders lost to artillery thunder. Tanks followed, crushing barbed wire and broken bodies alike. For days, the lines wavered. Some units were overrun, others cut off entirely. Officers fought alongside privates, firing rifles and throwing grenades, because there was no one else left to do it. Men who had never expected to lead suddenly found themselves commanding what remained of shattered platoons. At the heart of the chaos was a bitter truth. The beachhead was too small. There was no depth to retreat into, no room to maneuver. Every defensive line was a final line. When German attacks broke through, the fighting became desperate and personal. Bayonets were used. Shovels became weapons. Tanks fired point-blank into trenches. The smell of cordite mixed with mud and blood until it became impossible to separate one from the other. Survival depended on instinct, not orders. Air support roared overhead, but even that offered limited relief. Bombers struck German concentrations, yet the enemy always seemed to return. The hills swallowed divisions and spat them back as artillery fire. Each time the Allies tried to push forward, they were slammed back by pre-registered guns. The ground itself seemed to belong to the Germans. Soldiers began to joke darkly that the only way out of Anzio was in a body bag or on a hospital ship. Leadership at the top came under growing scrutiny. General Lucas was eventually relieved of command, replaced by General Lucien Truscott, a man known for aggression and clarity. Morale lifted slightly, but reality did not change overnight. The damage was already done. Momentum lost in January could not be magically restored in February. Truscott focused on holding the line, strengthening defenses, and preparing for a breakout that would have to wait until larger offensives elsewhere. Weakened German resistance, the waiting was torture. Days blurred together under constant fire, rain-soaked uniforms until they rotted on men's backs. Trench foot spread, lice thrived. Sleep came in minutes, never hours. Soldiers learned to identify incoming shells by sound alone, counting seconds to know whether they would live or die, so Maigret know. Others cracked. Evacuation for combat fatigue became common. A quiet admission that the human mind had limits even when the body kept breathing. Despite everything, acts of courage appeared everywhere. Men ran through fire to drag wounded comrades to safety. Engineers repaired roads under shelling so supplies could reach the front. Artillery crews fired until their ears bled, refusing to abandon guns even when counter-battery fire walked closer with each round. The defense held, not because it was strong, but because it refused to collapse. The Germans paid dearly for every failed assault, their own losses stacking high. But they never fully loosened their grip. Spring finally brought a shift. Allied offensives, elsewhere in Italy, began to strain German resources. Pressure at Monte Cassino intensified. Slowly, the iron ring around Anzio weakened. In May, the long-awaited breakout began. This time, it was overwhelming. Massive artillery barrages shook the earth. Infantry advanced behind walls of fire. Tanks rolled forward, not cautiously, but relentlessly. German lines cracked under the combined weight of men and machines that had been gathering for months. The escape from Anzio was violent, chaotic, and costly. But it was movement at last. Soldiers who had been trapped for over 4 months surged forward with a fury born of suffering. Towns fell one by one. The Germans retreated, fighting stubbornly, but no longer dictating the battle. Rome lay ahead, closer now. Yet the victory felt delayed, heavy with the memory of those who had died waiting for it. When Rome finally fell in June 1944, headlines celebrated liberation. Photographs showed smiling civilians and marching troops, but Anzio was rarely mentioned in those moments. It was already being absorbed into statistics, footnotes, and debates. For the men who had lived it, Anzio was not a stepping stone to victory. It was a warning, a lesson carved into flesh and earth that hesitation in war can turn opportunity into catastrophe. The beach remained behind them, silent again, holding secrets beneath its sand that history would never fully count.